Wilkow. I'm your host, Andrew Wilkow. Welcome to part 2 of our investigative series, Cartel in the Heartland. For years, we've been harping on the need to secure the border from the perspective of sovereignty and the rule of law, economics, the costs we all bear, and of course, national security. But the problem is already here. If the border was sealed perfectly tomorrow, where no one could tunnel under it, climb over it, or be smuggled through it, we would still be dealing with a major crisis, a cancer. And that cancer is the subject of an exclusive 2-part Wilkow investigation, the second part of which you're about to see. If you missed part 1, hit pause right now, go back and watch it because the spoilers are coming. In part 1, we investigated the alliance between drug cartels, gangs, and corrupt politicians, all colluding in a scheme worth literally hundreds of billions of dollars, with disastrous consequences from America's cities and towns. In part 2, we add another layer to the equation that illustrates just how dire the consequences of open borders have been to America. The terrorist networks that are working with the cartels and the gangs to achieve their nefarious goals in our hemisphere. This was revealed in part through Project Cassandra, an interagency federal investigation into Hezbollah's activities that the Obama administration allegedly quashed so as not to scuttle the Iran deal. The bombshell Politico article that revealed all this perfectly describes part of what you're about to see in part 2 of our series, with Project Cassandra revealing, quote, evidence that Hezbollah had transformed itself from a Middle East-focused military and political organization into an international crime syndicate that some investigators believe was collecting $1 billion a year from drug and weapons trafficking, money laundering, and other criminal activities. Agents working out of a top-secret DEA facility in Chantilly, Virginia, used wiretaps, undercover operations, and informants to map Hezbollah's illicit networks. They followed cocaine shipments, some from Latin America to West Africa, onto Europe and the Middle East, and others through Venezuela and Mexico to the United States. They tracked the river of dirty cash it was laundered by, among other tactics, buying American used cars and shipping them to Africa. And with the help of some key cooperating witnesses, the agents traced the conspiracy they believed to the innermost circle of Hezbollah and its state sponsors in Iran. Hezbollah is on America's doorstep, and they're only one of the terrorist groups threatening us due to our border insecurity. The stakes could not be higher. Here is part 2 of our investigative series, Cartel in the Heartland.
Planning further terror attacks against the United States.
Al-Qaeda has a senior operative that is so familiar with America.
He's identified as, and they don't know where he is. Shukri Juma, Al-Qaeda terror activity. Another, Mohammed Atta, may pose an imminent threat to U.S. interests worldwide. Jafar, the pilot,
narco-terror charge of all global operations. To truck bomb the Chicago studio was at one time an FBI that the FBI and Homeland Security was in his not apartment. Providing any details about this case.
On that street back there, one of those buildings is believed to be used as a drop house or a safe house for ISIS operatives. These are real threats. This is not make-believe. Just give me an idea, if you can, about your own personal motivation or your own drive to get this story out and to let the public know what's really going on.
My own personal reason for this is for the safety of, all the border community. Because we are in a great danger. We live in an area that is, we're like a forgotten person. Because nobody pays attention out here. We have police out here that don't even pay attention to what's going on. Our own law enforcement turn their face to it. So I think the public needs to know so that they can protect themselves and be aware of what's happening, right underneath their noses.
And it's a very grave threat. I don't think people necessarily appreciate They may think, oh yeah, the border, you know, there's illegal immigration and there's human smuggling and yeah, there's drugs, but I don't think they necessarily appreciate the threat from terrorism and from guys who they really want to do harm. You know, it's not just making a few bucks by selling some marijuana, you know, out of the back of a van or something. This is a very complicated, big business with where narcotics and terrorism intersect, and I don't think people appreciate how dangerous it really is.
No, and I don't think that people in this area, in this Southwest region, understand how big of a deal it is, because we've been misinformed, basically misled by the media, that there is no great danger here. And that's not true. Because more and more, they're trying to do their stuff out in the open, thinking that no one's going to say anything or eat anything, or even if they do see it, they're going to be too afraid of protest. You know, we turn a blind eye to it, and they're becoming more and more confident in their doing. They're starting to run us over.
In Phoenix is a great example. The largest gang member-wise in Phoenix is a group called Wetback Power. They initially, when they started out, they were almost all illegals from Mexico. Now you're having people that are maybe were born in the U.S. or they're dreamers in that group. But they, number-wise, they're the largest group in Phoenix. And as they come in, they initially started out as one, and now they're spread out. Every high school in inner city Phoenix has a faction or a set of Wetback Power in every inner city Phoenix school. They're there. And it's something that school resource officers have to deal with. They have to deal with the discipline. They have to deal with the intimidation. They have to deal with drive-by shootings because the various gangs will fight with each other.
Well, and what this shows is how serious DC is not about border security. It is a national security issue, and this is all we get for a national security issue. So they come from the south, cross this border. Up there, a lame cow on a bad day could get across the border.
Mark Spencer has spent more than 20 years in local law enforcement in central Arizona. Today, he represents the watchdog group Judicial Watch.
Well, here you have Phoenix. It's the 5th largest city in the country. That has an impact on the nation as a whole. You have illegal drugs. You have a real viable terrorist threat coming across that border. There was a thing called Fast and Furious that started in Phoenix. So all of this is connected to the border, not to mention the opioid crisis, which starts here, comes up to Phoenix, and it'll wind up in gun wars in Chicago.
And that's another thing. This is not a national health issue we're talking about. It's a national security issue. If you look at just Hezbollah alone and their emergence into cocaine trafficking in the ton quantities, and a few years ago under Project Cassandra, one individual was indicted in Virginia for moving $200 million a month through this trade-based money laundering ring to support Hezbollah. And this individual actually was prosecuted, indicted for moving the proceeds of 85,000 kilograms of Los Zetas cocaine. So we're talking about huge business.
Go to Peoria, Illinois, Seattle, Washington, Midland, Texas, Tampa, Florida. You can buy any kind of drug 24/7. That couldn't happen if law enforcement or the criminal justice system was even getting 10%.
I want to remind you again, it only takes a couple of corrupt law enforcement officials to compromise the entire system.
It's been theater for decades. I only did police work for 25 years, and even back then, it was clear if you just shut the border down, you'll solve this war on drugs, or at least make a huge gain, a huge stride in solving it. 90% of the problem is at the border easily. Commit to that, you'll probably solve the problem. They don't want to commit to it because it infringes upon their prerogative of power and their prerogative of profit.
I believe the ultimate goal is money. The terrorists are helping the cartels on how to use explosives, and I would think that they get their training from the Middle East, and I think they bring their knowledge. I do not know directly what it is, but seeing and hearing what I'm hearing, it seems that they have a partnership to where the cartels are using the terrorists to help bring narcotics across, and the terrorists are helping the cartels with knowledge on how to use explosives. And it might not be a real tight relationship, but it's still a relationship to where they both benefit from this relationship that they have going.
Put the drugs aside a second. They're charging like $3,000 to $10,000, according to the DHS secretary. They're charging $3,000 to $10,000 to bring these people in. They're making $500 million a year just in human smuggling, right, on the border. A lot of these people are probably coming in on the tunnels. It's not just the drugs, right? And God only knows what type of people they're smuggling in, because they don't really care. They're just about making money. So, you know, you have, Middle Easterners that are flying into Central America, flying into Venezuela, getting into Mexico, going through the tunnels, and next thing you know, we have them all over our country.
For the cartels, it's a business. They'll work with anyone that they can make money with. It's a financial transaction. And in many cases, that has to do with militant Islamist terrorists who are seeking to exploit the southern border of the United States because it's so weak.
Always goes back to the border, always.
What's coming across that border is a product. It's either bodies, guns, or drugs. And like any other product, you have a distribution system. Phoenix is the big warehouse of the system. That's where you store the guns, the drugs, and the bodies. From there, it's dispersed nationwide. That's why sanctuary city policies, what Phoenix has, is so critically flawed. It encourages the business and the trade, which once again deteriorates or is corrosive for the quality of life in our city. I had 6 Phoenix police officers murdered by illegal aliens. I've had more than 6 seriously injured by illegal aliens. It's unacceptable how it's ravaging our Hispanic community in the city of Phoenix. So when you make a city a distribution or an advantageous business spot for the cartels, expect chaos.
I work gangs. Whether a street gang unit, and later on I worked in a group that we were called the Violent Street Gang Task Force. It was a group with the FBI. We only targeted the most violent gangs operating in Phoenix, meaning the ones that were doing drive-by shootings, the ones that were moving drugs at a higher volume. So those were the groups that we targeted. And you're looking at these groups, you start investigating them, and every single one, when you look at the source of their drugs, always comes back to a Mexican group, always. You can look at a white group, you can look at a black group, and the source is always going to be a Mexican connection.
Here's my solution. A one-sentence order to the Department of Defense. Secure the southern border of the United States. It's the same mission we had in East and West Germany, North and South Korea, Syria and Iraq, and the Department of Defense is extremely adept and very accomplished at doing exactly that. Step 2. Declare the cartels to be foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs. They're currently designated as foreign transnational criminal organizations, and that just isn't cutting it. When they're declared to be what they are, terrorist organizations, you give the Mexican government a choice. They can cooperate and get on board and help us to fight them as what they are, terrorist organizations, or we can do it ourselves. But making those designations would change the playing field dramatically.
The scale of the terrorist threat we face, which is aided and abetted and enabled by drug cartels, gangs, already in America is massive. The nexus between narcotics and terror, along with the bloodshed and the ruining of neighborhoods as a result of these dangerous networks, should outrage all Americans and force our entire political class to act. We need to shut down the border because that's the root of the cause of the drug trade, gang violence, and terror. But we also need a comprehensive policy to deal with the problems that are already here, including rooting out the political corruption that enables these problems to persist. Getting a handle on immigration is critical, not only to sovereignty, but to national security. Sadly, the decades of negligence or outright collusion between our politicians and the criminals means that if all illegal immigration stopped tomorrow, we'd still be dealing with a crisis in the United States. America must dedicate all elements of its national power to remove the cancer of the cartel in the heartland. And please, if you've ever thought about inviting your friends or family members to watch an episode of Will Cow, Make it these two. Thank you for watching this special episode of Wilkout.